So if I can have your attention, please. Oh. Good morning.
Good morning.
Still morning. It is great to be with you. And there was a hope that we would have a microphone, and that wasn't working right. So I'm going to project. If you need to hear me, just wave at me. I've been given a set of questions, things that you all have pre-submitted. And so I'm going to do these in a random sort of order, right, in terms of how I've been given them, and going there. So a question that I'm often asked, what is the most surprising thing you've discovered about the Pacific Northwest or about the Diocese of Olympia? Most surprising thing about the Pacific Northwest is that if snow up to an inch is coming, we hear about it for like 10 days. As someone who grew up in Michigan and lived most of my life in New England, we would hear about those storms if it was a nor'easter that was going to be like 18 inches of snow when they would start doing that. And in Boston, they would put out the French toast alert system because you would go out and buy bread, milk, and eggs. So that's where the French toast alert system would come up, and they would tell you how many French toasts you needed on a 1 to 5 sort of scale. What I have found true about the Diocese of Olympia is because we live in the Pacific Northwest, where not everyone is engaging in their faith or going to church. Those who do show up are here because they want to be here. Because of that, it feels like faith is deeper here, and the desire for faith, the desire to learn about faith, make disciples, is much more pronounced here than in other places where it can, from time to time, feel like church is the place where you go to meet with other people that are like-minded. And here, it's much more of a dedication to the way of Christ. Because, in talking with, especially young adults, many of them say that they have to come out to their friends that they're Christian. And it is hard for them sometimes to admit that, given how Christianity is often portrayed within the media, and how for many there's an experience of what Christianity is against rather than what Christianity stands for. So I'm grateful in being here because no one is embarrassed to talk about Jesus or about our faith in a way that can be important. How did you meet your partner, wife, spouse, significant other, spouse/wife, Melissa? She's here. You may see her from time to time. You're like one of the closest parishes to our house. So Melissa's been kind of taking a run. Visit 6. Is this the place that you were at? If I was ever going to come?
No, that was another church.
Yeah, another church didn't know who Melissa was and said, "It's great to see you a couple of times. I see you have a wedding ring. Is your husband ever going to come or your spouse?" That's what she did. Like, yes, in fact, but it just depends on what Sunday your visitation was. So we met, actually, Melissa, the neighbor across the street from Melissa, a gentleman named John Wells, went to college with me. And John Wells was getting married. John and I were on the same floor in college for a time. And then he was getting married after we had graduated from college. And Melissa's brother, John, and I were both at the wedding party. And so I ended up meeting Melissa shortly after that wedding. And we met at church, interestingly enough. And Melissa was working that summer as a college camp counselor for a girls' camp up in Maine. And so I commuted back and forth from Massachusetts to Maine. She had one more year of college. I'm in Chicago, and so we were really apart. But we have been married now. We just had our 30th wedding anniversary in December. So yes, we were 12 when we got married. Speaking of Christmas, do you have a particular gift that you remember from when you were a child? What was it? How did it impact you? Yes, in fact. So when I was 4, I think, I received a Smokey the Bear, a stuffed Smokey the Bear, and a little tent, and a little sleeping bag that was missing. And I remember going over to my cousin's house, and we were playing with Smokey. He had a plastic cap, the cap that you wear, that ended up, the strap broke, and I was really anxious about that. And then when I got a little older, I started calling Smokey Ted, because that was cooler. And so Ted has been with me since 1973, 74. I say, yeah, he's wearing jeans that are built in. He's got a belt buckle that is not broken. He is currently in the college dorm where my son is at. I'm visiting with him. Although he said he needs some stitching done because he's starting to overstuff his jeans. Have I ever attended or marches or spoken at any protests? If so, which ones? Yes. Following the early in January, right after Trump won, there was, you may remember, a Muslim ban on countries and on Muslims in particular coming into the U.S. And as part of the work that I was doing in interfaith, there were a number of Muslim neighbors that were going into Boston at Trump Square. And so we participated in that larger sort of gathering. We just talked about, that we had neighbors who were Muslim, who had family members who might not be able to come back and forth to the U.S. simply based on their religion. In other places along the way, we, in Southborough, Massachusetts, St. Mark's, which is where Mark came from today. I realized I was like, I said Mary and Mark because I'm still on autopilot in my head. So at St. Mark's Church in Southborough, we founded, together with those Muslim neighbors, Neighbors for Peace, which was a broad interfaith group, Jewish folk, Muslim, Buddhist, many different Christians, folks who had no particular faith whatsoever, who wanted to attend. And we would often gather together, on the positive side, we would gather together around Thanksgiving, which is a, you don't have to have a specific faith to engage in the Thanksgiving services. It's what we as Americans, and so we would gather together, read from different holy texts and say prayers and engage in a meal or a dessert together. I think it flipped every other year or something like that. But that group also would gather together during especially hard times, when something might have happened along the way, and gather together in Southborough, a small town of 10,000 people, but there was a center area where there was a big grassy field. And we would often end up being there together. And as one of the founders of that, as someone who does public speaking, I was asked to speak quite a bit, actually, at those gatherings. And in that speaking, it was similar to sort of what I've been giving voice here recently. How do we be people who work toward peace? How do we recognize that our neighbors, even those who might worship differently from us or come from different areas of the world, most of us are looking for the same things. Of living in a place where we can be accepted for who we are, where we and our children feel safe, where we can engage and learn from one another and develop those relationships. and be at a place where all are taken care of. And that, what brought us together was often that, and then how do we communicate that out into the wider world? And also to continue, I mean, it was always interesting when a specific group was being targeted in one way or another, including our local law enforcement, and bringing them in to have them talk with us as well, so that we could stand behind, you know, there was a time when Asian hate, right around COVID, really took off. Never mind engagements with people of color around George Floyd or other places, and so it was an opportunity, and we often lamented, frankly, that it was far too often that we were getting together for things like that, to have a vigil or respond after someone had been hurt, or to speak out against injustice, and how grateful we were for the relationships that we had built with one another. There are a couple here around this sort of topic. Do you think the national church is doing enough to speak out against what appears to be constant injustices going on in this country? And Michael Curry, the former presiding bishop, seemed to relish being on the Today Show, being the face of the Episcopal Church. I had to look up who the new presiding bishop was because I had no idea, although you pray for him, I think, all week. Sean Rose. Should he be doing more to bring attention to the church, and if so, how? And have you met him, and what can you tell us about him? None. All of that sort of goes together. So let me back into this by talking about, yes, I know Sean Rose. That's easy. We gathered together as a house of bishops, so all of the bishops in the Episcopal Church, both current bishops, about, I think, 120 of us, 115 of us, give or take, plus those who have retired, because once you're a bishop in the Episcopal Church, you're a bishop forever. So they're invited to be there. And Sean Rowe is the one who brings us together and goes around visiting every diocese throughout his tenure. The presiding bishop does that over a 9-year tenure. Bishop Rowe has made it clear to us that he is not going to respond to everything that comes across his desk, because he could do that every single day, as could any of us who are bishops or clergy. You know, that there are things that are going on in our world that would could need some sort of response. And one of the other bishops got up and said, it feels like, in particular lately, that there's a laser pointer and we're the cats. And constantly, if that's what we're going after, it will always be flat-footed and responding to things rather than being proactive about those things that we want to stand for. So compared to Michael Curry, Bishop Rowe has certainly dialed that back some, but intentionally so. And he's also allowing for things that when they happen, to allow the bishop who's in that patch, in that diocese, to speak first, and then try to amplify that voice. One of the ways in which Bishop Rowe got a little pushback was after Bishop Marianne Buddy's sermon. And the day after the inauguration, I'm sure most, if not all of you, have seen that. And so people were reaching out to him saying, how come you're not giving, you're not doing more in terms of elevating that? Which he said, I'm not sure I could elevate this. But the second thing is that he was working with her behind the scenes to find out how he could be supportive of her and their all of the people that work within that diocesan office. And what they needed most of all was support, because their convention happens, I think, this weekend. So like a week or two after that sermon went out, actually, so it would have been right around now, a year ago. She was getting ready for her diocesan convention and just needed hands on deck to take care of things. If you don't understand that, talk to anyone in a diocesan office. It's like getting ready for Holy Week and Easter. Just constantly going and printing things up and getting stuff out. And they were fielding, as you might imagine, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. The amount of mail that Bishop Buddy got was enormous. And so Sean is taking, a little bit of a different approach of saying, we're going to step back. And not that we're not going to engage, but we want to make sure that we engage where it can really make a difference and say things that are going to be really important and kind of rise above the noise level, which is what many of the bishops are in conversation, and I've been in the last 2 weeks, 2 different gatherings of bishops. One was a contemplative retreat, actually where Bishop Buddy was with me on that, and there were 17 of us bishops. And then this past week, I was with a gathering of Province 8 bishops, who were primarily the Pacific Coast and 1 level of states in, plus Hawaii, Alaska, Taiwan wasn't there, but they're part of that group as well. So it's a very big province. And in all of that, we were all in agreement of not making statements just to make statements. And how do we do it in a way that's faithful and allows others to respond? This past, with all that has been going on in Minnesota, Bishop Craig Loya has really been speaking out, who's the bishop there. There was a service this past Tuesday or Wednesday, a vigil that they held with both Bishop Loya and presiding Bishop Sean Rowe together. There were, I think, 3,000 people on that. It was a Zoom gathering for prayer. And really an encouragement, again, to keep on praying and to figure out how it is that we can faithfully live into the work that we're called to in a whole host of ways. And that was partly why I spoke this morning about that film, in Life. Because the way that Franz went around doing that was very different than being out in front. And yet, we need all of that. We need, especially people in all sorts of times, to live faithfully as disciples of Jesus and engaging in ways that changes the course of how we interact with each other. For me, what that has meant is that I too am not giving out a statement every week. I did make one recently about Minnesota simply because I felt like I needed to, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And that statement primarily was focused on how do we pray? How do we recognize that contemplation is the place where we can be centered and engaged in the life of faith and in our engagement with God, to allow that to then feed what it is that we go, how we respond and how we go on. I think far too often prayer is seen as, oh God, help those other people know I'm right. Instead of saying, help us to be in tune with your spirit. Help us to see in each other the face of Jesus. Help us to respect the dignity of every human being. And as a bishop, and we did it again today, right? Just about every Sunday, I'm renewing the baptismal covenant because we're doing confirmations or there's a baptism or something. And it's been a reminder again and again and again how easy it is to denigrate other people. And this is across the board. This is not just one political side or the other. All of us can too easily slip into what our society wants us to do, which is to see each other as less than. So for me, that place of prayer, of contemplation, of stillness, allows me to recognize that God loves every human being, that each human being is a gift. And then how do we go out and respond in an appropriate way? Other things to know about Bishop Sean, he's younger than me, although he's been a bishop for 17 years. He was, when he was elected, he was like the youngest bishop in a really long time. And so I think he's 49, maybe he just turned 50. And they have a daughter who is in 7th or 8th grade. And he grew up in around Erie, Pennsylvania, in that area. And so that's where his wife and daughter still reside, primarily for her to not have to be disrupted in going to school. And so he commutes back and forth from there. He's in New York City and has more miles than I could ever imagine wanting in my life. Yeah. What's my favorite movie and why? I love movies. Listen, why? What do you think I'm going to say? So movies that I enjoy, I'm not going to say what is my favorite because I really don't know. Shawshank Redemption is high up there for me because of the story of redemption that's found in it. Ratatouille is probably my favorite of the Disney Pixar things because I love to cook and it's just fabulous. Do you have anything else?
Well, lately, Phil's been in Guillermo del Toro.
Oh yes, Guillermo del Toro films. Yeah. So I do like. I said today that I like mysteries. So there's that. Yeah. Okay. Where have Noah and Olivia started their college careers? What are their interests and studies in life? Noah is the older one, and he is 21. He turned 21 in December. Olivia is 20 months younger, so she is 19, which meant that they were just a year apart in school. Noah went off to school in kindergarten, and he thought he would go as soon as he turned 5. So when he turned 5 on his birthday, he walked upstairs and grabbed his backpack and said he was ready to go to school. I had to say, yeah. So we had to explain to him, no, you have to wait until the next August to start up. We're sorry about that, pal. And then when he finally started that August, we were living in Colorado at the time, Olivia looked at us. She was 4, just turned 4. I am going to kindergarten next year, she said. Which we were like, okay. So she was the youngest in her class, being an August baby. So where they are now, Noah is at Princeton University in New Jersey. Olivia is at Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts. They are both in the middle of their sophomore years. Noah is interested in public policy as well as journalism. He spent a gap year in West Africa, in Dakar, in Senegal, and so is looking at probably picking up an African Studies minor because of that and seeing where all of that leads. Olivia is interested in biology and neurobiology and nutrition. She also runs track at Williams. She's a hurdler. For a number of years was a gymnast, which allowed her then to not be afraid of running at things and jumping over them. And she will likely have some sort of career in health fields. As a gymnast, she has broken many bones and done a lot of physical therapy along the way. Most of them were not because of gymnastics, by the way, if you have any kids. She had a vulvar fracture on her hip because Noah was chasing her around the dining room table. Melissa is a professor with a focus in language and literacy. How is she planning to use that in the Pacific Northwest? Good question. So Melissa has been teaching at Bridgewater State University, which is in Massachusetts, doing so remotely since she's been here. She was 1 year away from tenure. I'm spilling my coffee. Thank you. And for those of you, so she's continued to do that. She's teaching 2 classes that start this week at Bridgewater State. And she's an educator of educators. I mean, that's what. So she teaches those who are becoming high school or, let's say, middle school or high school primarily in terms of the teaching. And yes, she's looking for ways to explore that here. anyone in higher ed knows it's not a time to be in higher ed. And so in her spare time, she's doing a lot of work for helping us out and getting situated and moving 3,000 miles away from her parents and her kids, launching them both. So how this all really went down was I started on August 1st of now 2 years ago, right, in 2024. After the election, I flew back home on about the 15th or 16th. We closed up our house, got both kids launched, and we're back here to start on September 1st. And none of our stuff arrived until the Tuesday before the consecration, which we had to call because they had lost all of our stuff. So we were sleeping on an air mattress that was leaky and it hemorrhaged at one point, and sleeping on the floor. The dog had a better bed than we did. And then last spring, Melissa's dad had a stroke. And thankfully he has recovered, but it has meant a lot of flying back and forth to Boston, where they live, as well, to be with them because Melissa's their health problem. She has two other siblings, but we were the closest. And frankly, Melissa's the most important. Of course, the best looking, but I knew that already. And so was able to, because of that, give a lot of time to caring for her parents. So we're still in the midst of figuring all of that out. What in your mind is the path to creating a more diverse diocese from the parishioner level up to leadership? I think part of it is to continue to express as clear as we can what it means to follow Jesus. That's an invitation to all of us, and not just to a few chosen ones. And being out there and giving witness to your faith. I think that for many who are Episcopalians, we tend to shy away from talking about our faith because we don't want to turn into hey, we're trying to proselytize you, or tell you that you're bad if you don't worship the way that we worship. The problem is we throw out the baby with the bathwater in all of that, because we come across people probably almost every day, and if not certainly every week, would do well to hear about the good news of Christ. And however we do that and live into that, I think it's an invitation for people to come in and join us. Not so that we can have more people in the pews to give us more money, because that's not what abundance is about. But about how it is that we help people to find their relationship with God. Because that's the more abundant thing, truly. It's for far too long we focus in on our buildings, or how big the budget is, or how many rear ends we get into the pews, 3 B's there. And have that be our focus, rather than how is it that we live into the call of Jesus and bring that good news to others. And so again, and this will be the last thing I say, but just an opportunity for us to fully live as disciples, to engage in big and small ways. Because each of us has been, in my mind, created by God for specific things. And God is inviting us to use those gifts in a countercultural way, and to recognize that we have more than enough, that we don't have to have a scarcity sort of mindset about things and say, oh, it's never enough, we don't have enough, we're not good enough, but to turn that completely around. Jesus himself, remember, had just a couple of fish sandwiches, right? And then ended up feeding 5,000 people. We could do the same. If we were to truly believe in the goodness and abundance of God. So it's great to see how you all are doing, to see how you're engaging with your new priest, newish. And I knew you were here, but new priest in charge. And for all that can lay ahead of you, and I just want to continue to encourage you in that great work. Any other brief questions. Yeah.
I was on the convention in 2024, when it just came out. How did it go?
How is my
Dog.
dog, Charlie Brown?
He was strong, or your older son, and with us.
Yeah, so Noah and I drove across the country. We got on I-90 where it started and got off where it ended. And Charlie Brown came with us, who was great in the car. He's doing well. He's at home this morning. He got a nice big walk this morning from Melissa. She walks him a lot. And he's doing well. Yeah. So he's, every so often he'll come in and out of the office with me. So he just likes to walk and sleep instead. He is a 60-pound, as a friend of mine said, American brown dog. So lab, some sort of hound, shepherd, something larger because he has an extra toe. We did not pay to do the DNA of our dog. What he is just really sweet. And doesn't lick me at all, ever. Doesn't jump like me. He's that. We hit the jackpot. All right. Thank you, friends. For those of you who are keeping track at home, you have 5 minutes before kickoff. Great to be with you. Certainly, thank you to those who did the food. It was amazing. And I recognize, that when I go out and about, that it feels like your mother-in-law is coming to visit. So thank you for all of the work that got done. I remember when I was a priest and the bishop was coming, it's like, oh, we would do, the silverware. All of the silver got polished and cobwebs came down that we didn't know existed and all of that. I know it can be a little bit of an anxious time, but thank you for all of your hard work. You certainly felt very welcome. All right. Anything else? More food, help yourself, we'll do your dishes.